Cool. According to the London Masons regulations of 1356, a medieval Mason had to begin his career with 7 years under instruction. He was then regarded and as trained, and entered on the rolls as a member of the lodge, but still classified only as an entered apprentice. 7 years later, he attained the status of Fellow of Craft. The man in charge of a building project was called a Master Mason. These terms, as we have seen, are used to describe that 3 craft degrees in modern Freemasonry. The of in Fellow of Craft, 1 of 7 of 13. That's really funny. It says the of in quotes. The of in Fellow of Craft has somehow disappeared. The Master Mason has considerable importance and dignity, primarily because the profession of architecture did not exist. The design of a building was the responsibility of the clerk of the works. In the case of church buildings, as cleric, and in the case of castles and halls, a royal or feudal official. The clerk of the works was an educated man. The post was held, for instance, by the poet Chaucer. However, records indicate that the Master Mason often had a free hand. He was qualified in geometry, then classed as one of 7 liberal arts. He also kept the building accounts. The rules of the The rules of the Masons' Assembly, known as the Old Charges, are preserved in at least 115 documents. First in 15. The earliest of which are 2 manuscripts written in about 1390 and 1425. In the fuller version, that of 1425, when was the King James Bible written? A preamble names Euclid as the founder of Freemasonry and traces the history of the craft from the building of the Tower of Babel and of Solomon's Temple. It claims that the building of the Tower of it claims that the masonry was introduced to France by King Charles Martel, himself, it was said, a Mason, and then to England, where the first charter was obtained with the help of Saint Alban, and the first assembly summoned by King Aethelstan. The Old Charges also contain the moral obligations regarding honesty, sobriety, piety, and loyalty to the king, which Masons were bound to observe for the sake of their collective reputation. These documents are the source of some of the mythical history and moral precepts of modern Freemasonry. But they laid stress on the moral obligations of Masons. The Old Charges were essentially guild rules, as the following excerpts suggest. You shall be true to one another, that is to say, to every master and fellow of the craft, and do to them as you would they should do to you. That no master take upon him any lord's work, nor other work, but that he know himself able of cunning skill to perform the same. That the master honestly and truly pay his fellows their pay as the manner of the craft doth require. That no master nor fellow supplant other of their work. You shall not put him out unless he be unable of cunning to end the work. That every mason shall receive and cherish strange masons when they come over the country. He shall set him a fortnight on work at the least, and give him his hire, and if there is no stones for him, then to refresh him with some money and bring him to the next lodge. All medieval craft guilds and brotherhoods had their secrets, that is to say, methods of work that they concealed from outsiders in order to keep some kind of copyright in their crafts. Yeah, you can't copyright creation code, guy. Assholes. The system was derived partly by craftsmen in order to keep the limited amount of work in qualified hands, and partly by the municipal authorities in order to prevent runaway serfs and other strangers from exchanging the bondage of the feudal countryside for the relative freedom of the towns. The exclusiveness of the guilds and brotherhoods was ensured by secret passwords and initiation ceremonies. Now your safety word. Many such rituals survived the 19th century after beginning of the Industrial Revolution. They are satirized by Charles Dickens in Barnaby Rudge, and abbreviated or mock ceremonies were still acted out in some trades in recent years. For example, among coppers. Medieval stonemasons working in the countryside and often joined by strangers ran special risks of being fooled by impostors. By the late 16th or early 17th century, Scottish masons had apparently invented various signs of recognition, including special grips and a mason's word. And these signs have their counterparts in modern Freemasonry. Similar masons fraternities grew up in several parts of medieval Europe. In Germany, the Steinmetzen had their rules, their lodges, Bauten, and their secret grip. In France, the Compagnones, had an elaborate organization divided into 3 branches. That's why I couldn't be a mason, can't read. Anyways, divided into 3 branches with rituals of initiation. The C word survived to the 19th century, by which time they had been influenced by modern Freemasonry and absorbed the Masonic legend of Solomon's Temple into their mythology. But they remembered the craft guild run on the exclusive trade union lands. There was a considerable gulf between the medieval craft guilds and brotherhoods of the former Freemasonry that appeared in England in the 17th century. Freemasons distinguished between the two by describing the first as operative and the second as speculative masonry. Speculative masonry? The origins of the 17th century organization are obscure, and though its founders clearly had knowledge of the stonemasons' regulation and practices, there is no evidence that they were themselves working masons. No shit. What the fuck would they get their hands dirty? On the contrary, it seemed that in this period separate lodges were founded for and perhaps by men who were not masons by trade. Shocking. In Scotland, such people may have been admitted to the regular lodges as honorary members. The admission of honorary member into the Edinburgh Lodge was recorded as early as 1600. Gotta love Edinburgh. Edinburgh. Both these practices spread rapidly, and by the 1670, the Aberdeen Lodge consisted of 4 noblemen, 3 gentlemen, 15 tradesmen, other than masons, and only 10 working masons. However, the first real landmark in the history of modern Freemasonry was the foundation by the London Masons Company of a parallel body called the Exception. No, Exception. I said acceptance is the first thing. Exception. In about 1619. I circled 6, circled 9. This organization was set up for the admission of men who were not masons by trade. They were known as accepted masons or gentlemen masons, and they did not belong to the company proper, though they paid double the regular initiation fee and doubtless helped to build up the funds. Weird. The motives that spurred non-Masons to join associations modeled on the Stonemasons Lodge are far from clear. To get ahead? Anyway. Though we may hazard a guess that secrecy itself was a major attraction. Many have been motivated by a spirit similar to that which generated Roscurianism. I don't know. The conviction that they might obtain access to hidden winds. Okay, I gotta fucking read that. Many may have been motivated by a spirit similar to that which generated Roscurianism. The conviction that they might obtain access to hidden wisdom. Fuck, we should all be doing that. This was the avowed motive of one Welsh poet, Gornway Owen, and also of antiquary Dr. William Stuckley, who admitted that curiosity led him to be initiated into the mysteries of Masonry, suspecting it to be the remnants of the mysteries of the ancients. Another factor indicated by Douglas Knopp and G.P. Jones in their book Genesis of Freemasonry. Guys, there's a book called Genesis of Freemasonry. Was probably the growing interest of amateurs in architecture and in antiquity. This taste developed among those wealthy enough to make the grand tour of Europe, and many gentlemen travelers returned with the passion for Palladian architecture and an urge to have their own designs executed. Like the War Memorial. These motives are typified? These motives are typified in the case of Elias Ashmole, the founder of Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, who became a Freemason in 1646. As an antiquary, Ashmole had a strong interest in medieval architecture. He collected material for work on Windsor Castle. He delved into alchemy and the Kabbalah, and he was deeply interested in Rorschachism. You're stuck here with me. Anyways, this had led some scholars to suppose that he was responsible for the introduction of the, oh god damn it, Rosicrucian, I don't even know what to try, symbolism, and the Rose-Croix degree into Freemasonry, though lodge records indicate that he was an infrequent attender. 12. At the same time, the architectural profession was coming to formal existence, and later in the century, many architects became Freemasons, following the lead of Sir Christopher Wren, 1632 to 1723. That's fucking old. He was an old guy back then. But by 1735, modern or speculative Freemasonry was in full flower, and members connected with architecture and building must have been heavily outnumbered. A pocket companion for Freemasons laid down, "No man ought to attain any dignity in Masonry who has not at least a competent knowledge in geometry and architecture. And if the sciences were more followed in the lodges, what is unhappily substituted in their place would not prevail as it does." The reproving phrase suggests that many of the newcomers had joined simply because the lodge was a good nightclub. Nevertheless, much of their time must have been spent in earnest speculative discussion about math and number. For it was in the years leading up to this time that the symbolism of Freemasonry first developed, and that the tools and methods used in the building trade were endowed with precise moral significance. Thus, the unhewn stone, or rough ashlar, that is part of the furniture of every Masonic lodge is said to represent man in his infant or primitive state, rough and unpolished. The unpolished stone, or perfect ashlar, represents man in the decline of years after regular, well-spent life in acts of piety and virtue, which can no otherwise be tried and approved than by the square of God's word and compass of his own self-convicting conscience. Taking the comparison even further, and by analogy with Christ's words, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God?" Solomon's temple is taken to represent a perfect man. A book by John Bunyan, Solomon's Temple Spiritualized, 1688, drew similar allegory, also using the procedures of building to illustrate the process of spiritual development. I talk a lot, but